laser safety guidelines and laser safety standards. That's our topic for today's discussion. Or in other words, is your laser show safe? Well, today I have someone very special. We have our very own laser safety officer with us to discuss laser safety, and that's going to be the topic of our conversation. I have got my black shirt on, my interview shirt. I've got my notes. I've got my coffee. I'm ready to go. And the most important question of today is, Roberta McHatton, how are you today?
I'm good, Tim. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this interview. Been looking forward to it.
It's excellent. And thank you for coming here. You know, we're going to be talking about laser safety, which in my opinion is one of the most important topics that is so much overlooked by so many people, because they literally either don't know there are safety regulations in place and that laser offers some potential hazard, or they don't care. And one of the things that you mentioned to me in the preamble of all of this was how many lighting designers you're working with. And I found that to be really, really interesting. So laser safety is going to be our topic. I'm really grateful to having you here. And for those people who don't know you, and how don't they know you? You've been in the industry for 25 years.
Yep, about 25 years.
Let's just talk about you for a little while. You have been working with some incredible people over the 25 years, and you sent me a list of some of the people that you have been working with, such as the federal aviation authorities, such as, and let me just check my notes, Pet Shop Boys.
Yes, right.
Such as the iHeart's Music Awards,
Yes.
and America's Got Talent.
Yes.
Did you get to meet Simon Cowell?
No, I haven't actually been there in person.
Okay, because you know Simon's British and so am I. So
yes.
And then you've worked with two of my favorite bands, Metallica and Queen.
Yes.
Which is awesome.
I have been for.
So why don't you just give us a little bit of intro into you, what you've been involved in and what you've been doing?
Well, I got started in this business many years ago for a company called Laser Fantasy International. They did basically planetarium shows. So it was graphics with some beam ballets, and then we made lasers as well. When I went to work for them, they hired me and put the safety hat on me, and I learned everything literally in the 2 weeks it took for the predecessor to leave the company. And it was a little intimidating because I really didn't have a background in physics, nor did I have a background, I was by then a little bit familiar with lasers, but I too hadn't realized when I first saw lasers that they were hazard or what the risk would be involved. And fortunately, that company sponsored me to go and participate in the standards, such as American National Standards Institute, ANSI, Z136, that's safe use of lasers. Use of lasers is different than, of course, projectors. That's a different topic. But anyway, and then as you mentioned, the FAA, Federal Aviation Authority, where they also had me participate with Society of Automotive Engineers. What I do on those committees and have been involved with for 25 years is help create the standards that we have to live by in practice. And I never thought I'd find it interesting. I don't have a background in physics, but here I am working side by side, and now for most of these people are from NASA, the military, medical professionals. They have doctorates in physics. I was very intimidated when I first started, but they were all very kind and gracious, and I've had some wonderful mentors over the years, and we're still very actively involved in that aspect. Through that, and then of course through working for the company, I got to know the other side of laser safety as far as the standards being applied in regulatory format, such as the regulations, where they become laws you have to live by. And in the United States, there's certain things you have to do here, and other places in the world it's more harmonized with the standards. Anyway, been doing this for about 25 years, and then Laser Fantasy, when the change happened in lasers, and we all remember that, when it went from gas lasers to the diodes and the DPSS and the OPSLs, the owner of the company I was working for decided he was done, and he retired, moved to Maui. Can't say as I blame him. And in that, I thought I was actually done with the industry at that point, because where are you going to go? I was basically working for the largest laser company in the United States at the time. Not the only one, but definitely one of the largest ones. And I didn't really think there was a need. Fortunately, I had a friend in the standard business who said, you know, you should put out your shingle, your website, because what you do is so specialized, there may be a need for it. And about 5 years after that, I started being wooed by several companies around the world. And ever since then, I've been doing consultation. Fortunately, I'm working really primarily with a company out of England, ER Productions. But I have also, I'm still doing variances, which you have to get in this country to operate lasers for laser safeties, for laser shows in the United States. I do laser safety officer training, and then I do, you know, aside some consultation as well.
All right, that's amazing. That's quite a journey in 5 minutes.
It has been a journey.
And interesting, you are based in the US, correct?
Yes, I happen to be out of Seattle, but the wonder of the world these days, you can do almost anything internationally. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. So, okay, sorry to interrupt. Sorry. So, how does the laws or regulations in the US differ from UK and Europe? Is there much difference, or are they pretty similar?
Laser safety is going to be pretty much the same worldwide. The law aspect of it can be very different from a country to country. As in UK, for instance, there was a law. It was I can't remember the name, of 65 anyway. That was just recently dropped because the laser show industry in the UK has done such a good job. They haven't been reported accidents or incidences. They're self-monitoring, that they now are just trusting the industry to handle itself. But they also implemented inspections. In the United States, we're such a large country that it's very hard to monitor the safety in practice. So over here, we have to get a variance from the federal code, CFR 1040.10.11, and we have to ask permission to use lasers in an open beam path setting, which is otherwise not allowed because we're always using very powerful lasers. We're using class 3B and class 4 lasers. You have to have high powered lasers or you can't see it. What's the point? Laser show wise. So in this country, you have to do that process. And I'm very familiar with that process. I've done it so many times over the years. So it's kind of a unique skill. And of course, it's not easy. I don't know how much you want me to go into detail, but you know, you go to the federal government, they have 2 branches, you have to submit paperwork to each one, they have to talk to each other, you hope they come out at the other end and you actually get the variance. A lot of things get lost in the middle and have been over the years. So it's been a learning curve for them. And then in, say, as far as I know, in China or I think Australia is the only other one that has regulatory expectations in general when you do a laser show. A lot of countries are very concerned about laser safety when you're in airspace. So there's definite expectation that you will at least let them know, and a lot of them will have a form that you fill out where you're telling them how powerful it is at such a distance from the laser and what kind of impact, and they either object or not object. They never approve, but and that can vary from country to country. Some countries really don't care that much unless you happen to be near an airport, and then only maybe. It varies. There's no real standardization, but in practice everybody should be aware that lasers can be hazardous and what they need to do to mitigate the hazards.
Yes, and you just raised a very interesting comment about aviation, and we'll talk more in a little bit about laser safety. However, when Coldplay came out to Manila, we were working with Strictly FX, who were supplying the lasers, and we were asked to liaise with our local aviation authority and Strictly FX to make sure that the lasers were okay. And the aviation authority here were actually very disturbed about how much effects, not just lasers, but sky trackers and all sorts of lights were going into the cockpits, and how so many airlines were now starting to complain about this as an issue. I think it's something we really need to take into consideration.
Yes. In the beginning, it depends on the country and if they had an incident or not. And unfortunately, in the United States, for instance, we had a horrible incident the very first time they became aware that lasers in airspace might be an issue, and that was in Las Vegas. And it flash blinded a pilot to such a degree that he couldn't see the runway to touchdown. And so ever since, I know, and fortunately his co-pilot could see. And it was very unfortunate because it put a very bad taste in the mouth of the FAA as far as dealing with lasers and or the searchlights, bright searchlights. Interestingly enough, there hasn't been a reported incident since then done by a laser show company. There are strikes all the time by laser pointers or handheld lasers, but laser show companies have too much to lose, so they tend to be fairly responsible about it. And in truth, you're not going to get biological injury, but if you ever seen a laser on glass, you'll see how it blooms. And that's the problem. It causes such a glare. You want to be careful about that whenever you're shooting like onto a bridge or over traffic. You don't ever want to drop onto windshields. But anyway, then in England, for instance, they've never had a bad incident, and they're really pretty good to work with over there. And they tend to be a very safety-oriented culture. And I'm surprised at how, I won't say lackadaisical, that wouldn't be appropriate, but how comfortable they are with having laser activity they know the companies, they trust them. There is that degree of trust. Even in this country now, there are some companies that have a greater degree, the authorities have more, they're comfortable with them. They feel like, okay, these guys are not going to be a problem. Other times they'll say no just because they don't know who they are. And it shouldn't really be that way. It should be even-handed. Australia, for instance, didn't become concerned about it until similar to Manila, where the very first time they ever had lasers in airspace where they realized they should be concerned was for the Olympics in 2000. And I happened to be with the company that was doing the lasers. And so their aviation authorities contacted me. I gave them the form I would fill out for the FAA and told them, look, I'm the proponent. You don't necessarily want to take my word for it. So why don't I recommend you talk to somebody on the FAA? They did. And that guy on the FAA said, oh, if Roberta says it's safe, it's fine. And though it was fine. In my opinion, it should be unfortunately, there's a big learning curve between with aviation and lasers. They're two separate languages. We had to learn to speak aviation language. They had to learn to speak laser language. And together we had to come up with what we call aerospace recommended practices that would give us guidelines so that everybody would feel comfortable.
Awesome. And I find this really interesting, and I think the audience will as well. And we could literally talk for hours and hours about this topic, but obviously we can't do that right now. We'll save that for another day. And
right.
I am joined by Roberta McHatton right now. We're talking about laser safety guidelines and laser safety standards, or in other words, is your laser show safe? And we'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. I am joined by our very own laser safety officer, Roberta McHatton. We are talking about laser safety guidelines and laser safety standards. Or in other words, is your laser show safe? So let's start talking more about what a operator can actually do. But let's go back a little bit further than that. Laser is, I've seen it spelled so many different ways. What does it actually stand for, the word laser?
It's an acronym. I will say a little bit. Historically speaking, it was thought of by our favorite, Einstein, in terms of it being on the electromagnetic spectrum. He conceived of the idea of a laser, but it wasn't actually built until many, many years later. So that was 1916. The word laser stands for light amplification by the stimulated emission of radiation. Not simulated, stimulated.
And what does that actually mean? It sounds fantastic, but what does it mean?
Oh boy, you want me to describe the physics of how...
In brief.
In brief, okay. There's electrons. They get excited. They emit photons. Photons will come back to rest. And if they encounter another photon, they go in phase. So basically, laser light is monochromatic, directional, and coherent. They're monochromatic, believe it or not, even though you see rainbows of laser, in laser beams, there are distinct sources for each wavelength you see that are combined. So there has to be RGB. Combined, you get white light, but it's monochromatic. So there's always inside a laser, either red, blue, or green. And if you're seeing a rainbow, it's because it has those three colors and they're combined in order to make white light. The more white your laser light is, the better the color balance and the better you will be able to spread it out into the peacock of colors. That's monochromatic. Coherent means it's all going in the same phase. Light waves go up and down. The color is measured in nanometers, and that's the measurement from crest to crest or trough to trough. In the electromagnetic spectrum, it's a tiny portion of the electromagnetic spectrum that is visible light. And that's basically 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers. 400 being the shorter wavelengths on the blue end, 700 being the red wavelengths on the long end. And I'll ask you a question. Which color do you think is the most visible to the human eye? Red, green, or blue?
Green.
You're right.
I know.
Didn't I? Most times people want to say red, and that's mainly because how were we introduced to lasers? Entertainment, movies, always had red lasers in the early days. That's what they, like a Goldfinger was one of the very first times we actually saw a laser in a movie, and it was a red laser. In fact, in production and they are the least easy to see by human eyes. The red wavelengths are the hardest for the human eye to see. So you need to bring down all the ambient light. And if you're going to have red beams, which production people wanted back then, they really wanted red beams. They're going, no, you want green. Trust us, you want green. Green is so visible that when the company I was working with was approached to do a line for football, the first down line, the green line. Well, it wasn't green, but anyway, they wanted, and we thought, oh, no way. This is like, think flashlight, light, sunlight, Texas, and football stadiums. No way is it going to show up. Well, believe it or not, a laser light, the green laser light on the green of the turf was highly visible even in full sunlight.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
So what is it about laser that actually makes it hazardous? Why should people be cautious?
That term radiation means there's a lot of energy focused into a very small space in time. So it delivers a great deal of energy versus light bulb where you have photons just scattered everywhere. Laser light has them all concentrated. So you can burn holes through things. They can cut steel. It's and unfortunately, you're right. There's a misunderstanding because people see pretty laser light and they think pretty light, and they don't really realize a lot of times just how hazardous it is.
Yeah, well, I think films like James Bond probably didn't help because it promotes it as a weapon. And I think over the last 30 years, almost 30 years that we've been involved in lasers, the understanding of laser has changed as well. I remember in the very, very early days, no one cared. We all just stood in laser and did our thing. But as lasers have become more and more powerful and more available, then, there can be a concern. And it's actually interesting. I guess a 30-watt light bulb is, in fact, more powerful than a 10 milliwatt laser. But which one has the more potential to do more danger? or more hazard?
The laser does, because again, it's concentrated. Also, it depends on what you're hitting. If you're hitting the eye, for instance, you not only do you have a very highly concentrated amount of energy that's entering the eyeball, you're entering a lens, which concentrates it even more, just like a magnifying glass. So a 1 milliwatt laser entering an eyeball, and it hits the lens just right. In other words, it's within the diameter of the lens itself. Has a 100,000 optical gain. It'll be 100 watts on the back of the retina.
Wow.
So yeah, right. It can cause very severe damage. And unfortunately, the human eye was never meant to have anything go to that part of the eye. The eye is extremely regenerative. The cornea, cataracts can be replaced, but nothing in nature usually affects the retina or the optical nerve. And that's the danger. So its eye exposure is considered the biggest hazard, biohazard in our industry.
Amazing. I never realized that such a small amount of power could be so hazardous to the eye, 1 milliwatt. And do you have any, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, do you have any kind of statistics or figures of the dangers or the hazards?
Yeah, sure. The biggest hazard is I don't know what, in terms of what. Okay, we'll talk professions. Technicians are at the highest risk because they're usually dealing with lasers in an open beam pass setting. There's a high chance that they could, and wearing eye protection, no, it's never meant to be, a laser's never meant to be directly viewed. And then of course you've got to deal with time as well as the amount of energy being deposited. And now a laser beam it looks like a pencil, right? And it's the same diameter. No, it actually does diverge, and and as it widens out, the laser becomes, there's more energy in less energy in a bigger area. So it spreads out the energy, so to speak. That's a very important concept to grasp. That's why you can even do audience scanning with a laser in the laser show industry, but you really have to be careful about how much power and how fast it's moving or the amount of exposure time you're involved in, but it does diverge. A good example is they did shine a laser to the moon, and I suspect, and they call divergence, they measure it in millirads, small m, capital R-A-D, and it's how fast does it diverge and how much. And by the time it got to the moon at 0.5 mil, very, very tight beam, it was a 2-mile spot on the moon, which is 260,000 miles away. So yeah, it diverges, but it doesn't lose its intensity that much for that long. If you've ever played with a laser and terminated it across the arena or the home or wherever you are, you will see that it makes a dot, and that gets bigger. The further away you are, the bigger the dot gets. So it's a little bit safer, but got to be careful.
Okay, so don't play with a cat.
No, don't hit it in the eye, okay? Don't hit it. One of the problems they're finding now is actually laser pointers. We know better in our industry, but unfortunately, laser pointers, which are available to anybody, and it has a little sign on it usually that says, do not point directly in your eye. So what do kids do? They hold their eye open and point, and they are getting retinal damage from that, kids doing that. Now, the laser light show industry, I'm very happy to report, hasn't had any reported accidents or incidences in about 20 years. There was about 40. All right, in the last 10 years, I think there's been 40 reported injuries. 30 of them were in Russia, where somebody had a pulse laser, NDAG, and the story I heard is it started raining and they pointed it down into the audience, and there was definite eye injury as a result. And then there's been a smattering of others. Now, honestly, between you and I and the rest of the world, I'm sure there are unreported incidences. It's sort of like hearing damage. Would you know if you got injured by a laser? You might have a floater in your eye that you didn't before, but would you associate that with what you saw when that happened? A hit that can actually cause a scotoma, which is a burn on your retina. However, you usually know it happened. And actually, they're now worried more about people having heart attacks or a stress reaction than the eye injury. There's not much you can do about the eye injury, but evidently injuring the eye is so scary that people will actually have more of a reaction, a heart reaction, stress reaction.
Wow, that's amazing. I never knew that. So
Don't do it.
With regard to production companies, what kind of issues should they be alert to when setting up lasers?
Very good. That is the most excellent question. I have several little pieces of advice. First of all, you need to be aware of what we call reflections. There's two types of reflections. There's spectral and diffuse. Spectral reflection is like a mirror. And so anything that would reflect like a mirror is something to be concerned about, and you need to be very aware if your laser is hitting something like that. So when you're setting up, for a good example is, I was on tour with a company that was started out in an arena. There wasn't really that much to be concerned about. There was a few windows they needed to avoid, mostly so it wouldn't go outside. And then there was a few lights, but they were easy enough. And make sure you put a sign on the door so the people don't walk in the catwalks. And then we went from that type of a venue to a Paramount, where we had crystal chandeliers. We had a balcony with a chrome balcony railing. We had glass everywhere with pictures and framed in glass, glass for the lighting booth in the back. And the poor operator, who was not that familiar with the process at that point, and he was given all of 10 minutes to set up and zone, was out of his element. I mean, he tried. And there's always something, like he did tell the ushers, okay, I'm going to be zoning over the balcony during this time frame. Do not walk into the balcony while I'm zoning. And this is a really very important. I recommend this to anybody when they're setting up lasers. Have more than just your eyes, because where are your eyes as an operator? You're looking at your monitor. You're looking at your computer. You're going to go back and forth and back and forth. You may miss the usher that didn't pay attention and walks through the balcony right when you're zoning. So I always recommending having one or two crew members on your shoulder who have full view of the beam path at all times, who are either standing next to you or have ability to communicate with you immediately should something come up. If somebody is where they're not supposed to be or they see a reflection. Okay. Other sources to be aware of when it comes to spectral reflection: mylar balloons, mylar confetti, glitter confetti. All those are highly reflective. Mirror balls. Should you ever laser mirror ball? In my opinion, no. If you want to, just only do it from the waist of the mirror ball up, because then it'll be, the reflection will go off and up. But mirror balls wiggle and they rotate, and they're just, it's a potential hazard. It looks pretty, but in fact, I actually tried to find a picture of a laser on a mirror ball. I couldn't even find one on Google. It's just like, so nobody knows, nobody wants to do that. Diffuse reflection, on the other hand, think of that as brushed aluminum or off of a wall, a white wall. Would be diffuse reflection. It's not as much of a concern. It can be under the right circumstances, but it's also what makes for beautiful haze and particulate. We are using that in show production value to work for us, because there's nothing better than a beam ballet through a very well hazed or a theatrical fogged up room. In fact, I highly recommend, if you can, distribute your fog throughout a venue, not just off the stage, because you'll get a more even effect. Balconies, are you terminating on a facade? Is that technically legal? You're supposed to always be 3 meters above the audience, or 2.5 meters to the side. But if you have balconies and people are sitting in the first row, yeah, they could hang their head over, I guess, or put their hands in it, or worse yet, put a glittery purse. We actually had that happen once, where somebody dropped over a very beautiful, rhinestone purse, and suddenly there were laser beams going everywhere. It is generally considered a justifiable practice because we consider the balcony a non-defeatable barrier. In other words, a person who, audience member who engages with the beam is really engaging in risky behavior, and they're generally not supposed to be doing. There may be times when you're asked by a venue to not do that, to not put it on the facade, but we all know the laser looks the best the closer it is over the heads of the audience. 3 meters, 10 feet is ideal, but there's still a lot of things, you know, that could happen as low as that. That's when it looks great. But what about crowd surfing? Or my favorite was the baby. We were doing outdoor 40-watt lasers in the air, gorgeous, right at 10 feet, beautiful, fairground, flat, no problem. And I'm there to watch airplanes. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a father with a baby on his shoulders, and he goes to toss the baby into the pretty laser. That would have been 40 watts in a baby's eye. That would have been a terrible, terrible thing. Fortunately, I had a shutter button in my hand, so I was able to actually shutter the laser. I didn't even have to do the delay to the operator, who then pushes the e-stop button. When you're in a concert, think about it. Most concerts, you're operating from FOH, front of house. Are you able to actually see the full beam path? No. So I highly recommend that in those situations, we used to always operate from the stage. You probably remember that from going back that far. Yeah. But now with the new technology, they're almost always operating at FOH, or where the sound people are. So have a couple crew members that are at this point not doing much else. Whenever the lasers come on, that is their job, is to watch the full beam path. And they should have an e-stop button, ideally, on the stage to press. If they don't have that, then at least have really good communication with the operator in case they need to have them shutter or, you know, push stop.
Wow, that's quite a lecture. And I think a lot of this boils down to the operator being very responsible, because it's very tempting, because it's so beautiful to put laser onto a mirror ball or onto these other things, onto Mylar.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as knowledge comes in and you start to understand the potential hazards and risks with it, it's really about the laser operator being a very, very responsible person.
Yes.
And asking, do I want to take the risk of some kind of physical problem with the audience, or even a potential lawsuit later on?
Yes, exactly. And do I need to? And do I really need to do that to make the laser be effective in the production values? 9 times out of 10, you don't. You need to work around the limitations that safety puts, which is just part of using something. The thing that's special about lasers is they hug the audience. They reach out and embrace it. No other lighting does that, but you must use it responsibly. I was going to anyway.
Well, I've got people in the Philippines that I've seen, other companies that, you know, are providing lasers. And what happened when I started here in the Philippines was, originally I was the only one doing lasers. Mm-hmm. And then eventually the light and sound company went out and got lasers. And obviously I've had laser training and they haven't. And they've got these 20-watt lasers in small ballrooms.
Yep.
When we started our company, I started off with a 500 milliwatt green laser, which I used for about 5 or 6 years without any issues. And as you said earlier, if you set up the haze correctly in the room, you don't need this massive amounts of power unless you start turning on, you know, the video walls and everything else. And it was really about how we set it up that we don't need this massive power. And quite honestly, if you set it up correctly, you don't.
That's right.
I've even done outdoor shows with a 500 milliwatt laser because we set it up correctly.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to do the Olympics with a 500 milliwatt.
Nope.
So
you bring up a really valid point. You know, you don't need a great deal of power. It used to be like more power, better. You know, it was, in fact, a lot of the sales pitch seemed to be on how much power of lasers you were going to provide. And I've really been advocating, especially with the drop in the cost of lasers since when we started back in the gas laser days. You know, you used to pay $60,000 to $100,000 for 3 watts, right? And now you can get a 3-watt laser for a couple $1,000s at the most. And you can get a 25-watt laser, you know, which is the most, in my opinion, that you would ever need for any large venue where there's a lot of ambient light. And I can see the times when you want to use that, but don't use more power than you need to. It overwhelms, it isn't necessary, and use more lasers. Right? Instead of one or two, like that was a big production back in the day. To have 3 lasers, oh my God, that was a huge part of the budget. Well, now you can have 10 and you can have 20, or you can have 314, you know, depending on what you want to do. And that's really quite effective without bringing a lot more power into it. Yeah, it's more beams to watch during the zoning and setup, but.
Well, awesome. And I hope this is really helpful to our audience. And thank you for sharing your knowledge. I'm presently with Roberta McHatton. We are talking about laser safety guidelines and laser safety standards. And we'll be right back in just a moment. So welcome back. I am joined by Roberta McHatton, our very own laser safety officer, and we are discussing laser safety guidelines and laser safety standards. Or in other words, is your laser show safe? Now, earlier, Roberta, you spoke very briefly about ILDA. And I just wondered if you could give a little introduction into ILDA, what you do with ILDA, and their role when it comes to laser safety.
ILDA is the International Laser Display Association. Oh my God, I'm ashamed to say I'm not sure how long they've been in existence, but I think from the 1980s probably. And it's an association where people from all over the world are obviously international, welcome to join. The membership fees are very, very reasonable. And I highly recommend you know, if you're interested in working in the laser entertainment industry, this is a great resource. For one thing, there's all kinds of information, plus you have members you can reach out to. Like if okay, I'm going to France, what are the rules in France? We have members there who will get back to you right away. Trust me, it's a very friendly camaraderie. We have a conference every year. Well, we're not even sure about this year, but next year the conference will be in United Kingdom. Sponsored by ER Productions, and I recommend that you come and attend. We do awards. We have several categories. People submit their work, and we actually have we bring our lasers and do laser shows, and we have a laser off where people get to they don't get to know what the music is, and they just come in and do their best. It's a lot of fun. It really is, and it's such a unique industry and so specialized. You'll love being able to talk to other people who can speak your language. I'm a board member of ILDA. I'm in my 3rd year of, they're 2-year terms each, but anyway, I'm still there. And let's see, they offer a series of courses on laser safety as well, even though I do as well, but theirs would be recognized internationally anywhere. They have a laser safety officer course. They have a laser safety course for operators, and they have one for audience scanning, which I personally do not provide. So if you want to know about audience scanning, you really need to talk to ILDA. You don't even have to be a member to take the course, but again, the membership fees are very reasonable, and it's a great organization. So I recommend you consider it if you are doing laser shows.
Awesome. So you would certainly recommend that as a laser operator, they join ILDA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic. And we'll have links in the descriptions beneath this video to show you how to do exactly that. What else can a laser operator do to make sure that, number one, their equipment is safe, and number two, that their shows are safe?
Well, they need to communicate well with the production crew. They need to be able to explain to lighting designers and production people what they can do and what they cannot do. We're seeing more and more lighting designers now step into this. I can only hope that they take the time to get the laser safety training. I've been having a big uptick in lighting designers. So obviously they realize there's a need for it, and I really encourage them to, because this is not typical of other kind of lighting. You really do need to be savvy to what the concerns are. There was another thing I was going to mention. I'm sorry. I went blank.
Okay, no problem. we were actually talking about laser equipment and show safety.
Yes. Okay. So laser equipment, you want to be sure your laser itself is in compliance with IEC 6085, I believe it anyway, that it has to have certain features. It has to have remote interlocks. It has to have interlock connectors. It has to have it might have a beam block, which is an attenuator that is bolted onto the front of it. You want to be sure it has its labels. If it's on a stand, you want to make sure the stand is stable. You want to make sure the clamps that you clamp it on with are solid and good. I've seen issues where clamps have slipped and the whole, top row of an audience was getting lazed because the clamp had slipped. So let's see what other things that you want to be aware of. You want to be aware and familiar with your programming. So I cannot emphasize enough practice. Practice before you get out there and do it in front of an audience. Set it up at your home or in your warehouse or wherever you are, and get your skills down. Zoning under different circumstances is really helpful and important. Are you setting up on stands? Are you going to be in trussing? If you're on a stand, never have it at eye level. Always you could have it on a stage floor, but make sure it's not directed up into eyes. Let's talk about performers. Can you laze them? No, technically you're not supposed to. However, if you do have, in this country, if you have an audience scanning variance, you can, but for limited time. Never in the face, you're not supposed to. I have, however, seen some companies where they just told the performers to close their eyes. A lot of times there won't be a problem until there's an actual accident. I say avoid the accident if possible. In the United States, you can come up to, the 3-meter rule goes out the window. You can do everything you want except touch a performer with the laser. But where is that performer? Are they going to drop out of the ceiling on a trapeze? I had that happen, where somebody in front of a 40-watt laser was coming down on a ribbon. The production people had said, "Oh yeah, we'll let you know when." Nope, they forgot to let the laser operator know. The laser operator could see the full beam path except on the stage. He wasn't looking up; he was looking out. Fortunately, I was standing in the wing, so I was able to get him to shutter the laser. Too close a call. So communication, and communication. Communicate with the crew, communicate with production people, communicate with everybody around you. By the time, and all this has to be done before the audience enters the venue, by all means. Let's see, I think.
And is laser safety training fairly easy to get? Where would someone go to get training?
Actually, yes and no. It is, but you have to know you want it first. So ILNA offers it, but they don't offer it all the time, but do look and see what their schedule is. I offer it. I only require 2 people or more in order to do a course. This is my way of giving back to an industry that has given me an amazing career. So at this point, I offer laser safety training. My certificates are recognized in just about everywhere in the world, with a few minor exceptions, like in the United States, New York administers its own test. And if you pass that test, you can do surgery. You can do, cut steel, but it's not just tailored to entertainment. It's rather overwhelming, but that's New York. You have to have a mobile operator's license there in order to actually perform lasers in New York. So most people just hire somebody who already has that license. So I offer it. Another fellow out of the UK, James Stewart, offers laser safety training. And those are about the only people I know of that actually do a course. You can. And
your course can be done online, is that correct?
Yes, I do teach virtually with a caveat that I really, really, really want people to set up and do a hands-on follow-up to my course. Because when I do it in person, of course, I can do that. But since this is the day and age of virtual training, and it's so much less expensive if I don't have to physically go there for the client who's now buying a laser for a couple $1,000 versus $100,000. It used to be the budget was there to have me come and do the training, but now people are buying lasers. They're much less expensive. So anyway, I do it virtually. I do have there's a lot of things involved, but not a lot of things, but there are certain things I request that you do as follow-up if you have my training, and that's set up a laser, not in front of, do a safety checklist. so that you tell. If I'm doing it, I always put the laser where if you put it right on the stand where I have it, you will hit a reflective object. That's my way of seeing if you're really paying attention or getting it. But there's a checklist. My training also gives you lifetime access to my laser safety manual, which is and Dropbox, which is more than you ever want to read about it. And I have a handful of things I can recommend for reading. You can learn laser safety from reading, but I don't think it's as effective as getting it from a person. I really don't. And then, of course, administering a test is another part of it.
Yes, and also, I seem to remember you told me that when you do a training with you, you get a free book, which I'll put here, a copy here. Yes, you get a free book. Tell me about your book.
Well, it came about out of frustration of many years of going, I wish there was a book. I wish there was a book for entertainment applications. Now, I am happy to say that ANSI, which is the American National Standard Safe Use of, is developing the .10, which is safe use of lasers for entertainment, display, and trade show. But it isn't published yet. And it's going to be a Bible that is going to be maybe a bit challenging for the average reader to really comprehend it. So I decided, along with, actually I was approached by the fellow who wrote the regulations for the state of Arizona, and he offered to co-author this with me. So he had a lot of credibility on the regulatory side. I certainly had the experience of the entertainment side, and so we collaborated and we wrote the book. It covers all the basic things you need to the topics you need to cover in a good laser safety training course, but it's really aimed at entertainment specifically.
Well, I'm very grateful to you because I got a free copy yesterday.
It's included with my course, and I would rather people have it. If they can't even afford it, I will make it available. It is, I think it's important. It's really important.
Just to give some feedback on the book, I took I haven't had an in-depth look at it just yet. I spent about 15 minutes looking at it, and I must say a couple of things. Number one, it's easy to read.
Yeah, that was my goal too. I wanted something.
It's packed full of information that we really need. I really think this is a book that people should get hold of, and it comes free with your course, correct?
Yes, or if you just want to get the book, it's $15. It's a PDF. Now, I will want to mention it is sort of geared to the USA. There's the appendix, the cover page for the appendix has all these links for you for the regulatory and other agencies in this country. But if you join ILDA, you can find out about the rest of the world. So.
Okay, and again, I will get the links off you later for that, and I'll put them beneath this video. So if people want that, they can get hold of it. And I would thoroughly recommend, for what I've seen so far in a 15-minute read through, it looks excellent. I wish I'd had this in 1990.
Yes, that's how I felt. In 95, it was like, why do 2 weeks of training and there's no manual? I mean, it was really very challenging. And
I think it's nice that you said that you can do laser safety training by reading books, but there's nothing quite like going to an establishment or going to a venue and your credibility is improved when you say, I've had a laser training course.
It really doesn't hurt to have a certificate of having successfully completed a course, which is issued upon taking a test. And both Ilda and I and James, we all issue certificates of successful completion, and they're recognized throughout the world. So
fantastic, fantastic. And your cat has just woken up, I noticed.
She's so shy around people, but every time I do anything online, she's right there. She loves it.
Awesome. Well, Roberta, I want to thank you so much for spending an hour with us so far and sharing your knowledge. I hope this has been a really fantastic education for the audience. And if people want to know more about laser safety guidelines and laser safety standards, and I'm sure they do, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website, but it's pretty basic. It's my business card that I posted. But you can always get a hold of me at roberta@lasersafetyservices.com. And I respond anytime anybody emails me. I'm usually within minutes. You may also call me if you want to at 425-753-5644. I have a site on LinkedIn, which has a little bit more information and background on me. And I've done several articles and things I'd be happy to forward to anybody who's interested. So best bet is email, actually, Roberta@lasersafetyservices.com. And thank you so much, Tim, for taking the time, for your interest, and for contacting me. This is a great platform, and I'm really valuing how much the world is education's so available now to people, thanks to people like you who take the time to put this kind of thing together. So well done.
Thank you. And this has been something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. We spoke about Argon TV and how it all came about earlier, but I really feel that in this, currently right now, what's happening in the world, we've all got this downtime, that is really a great time to like step back and see where we are and gather information, gather new knowledge, so that when we get the green light to go, I tell you, there's gonna be one hell of a party.
It is. And it's a great time to take a class, you know, because you've got the time. If anybody has a financial issue, reach out to me. I'll work with you. But if you can make use of this time by getting some laser safety training under your belt, and you're going to be using lasers, please do reach out.
And of course, if any of you have any questions that you want to send to me for Roberta, because we're such good friends now, feel free to drop me a line anytime. We will be having much more contact together, Roberta and I, so fantastic. But before you go,
yes,
one last question. And this is one of my favorite parts of the whole interview. What is Roberta's secret to success?
Honestly, my secret to success, because I was so, my background was so not physics, not lasers, not entertainment. When I suddenly found myself with a safety hat working for one of the biggest companies in the world, is don't ever pretend to know what you don't know. Don't be afraid to ask, because you'll find there's a lot of mentors out there who are more than willing to impart information to you. So when I stepped into that ring, I just decided I'm not going to pretend. I'm going to ask. And I didn't know what MPE was. I didn't know laser was an acronym. I didn't know any of that stuff. But instead of ostracizing me or making me feel stupid, they embraced me. And I will do the same for anybody else. And this is an amazing industry. I remember walking out of the Beatle concert, which was their last concert in Candlestick Park, and they looked terrible. They sounded terrible. And I had an idea of how, from my parents taking me to musicals and opera when I was a kid, that wasn't right. I didn't know they didn't have the equipment at that point, right? And I walked out of it going, all I want to do is grow up and make them look better and sound better. Never in my wildest dreams would I have dreamed I'd be doing what I'm doing today. And let alone lasers didn't exist. So who knew?
So awesome, Roberta. Thank you very much for being here. Final words about laser safety before you go. You have the last word.
Last word is implement your safety. Practice it. And I know it's not fun, but do record keeping. Oh, I know. Very important last word. I'm glad you gave me this opportunity, because what's going to really cost you money if you make a mistake is lasing a video camera or a projector, because you will fry the lens with a laser. So people, yeah, they may or may not ever complain. But let me tell you, if a video company, if you wreck one of their several thousand, if not $100,000 cameras, you will hear about it. So there's my piece of advice for today. Do not laze cameras. Look for them before you even turn it on. Make sure you know where they are.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Roberta McHatton, our very own laser safety officer. We have been talking today about laser safety guidance, laser safety standards, or in other words, is your laser show safe? This is Tim Bennett from Argon TV. Look forward to seeing you again soon in another episode.